I was a member of something called the Cambridge Women's Commission in 1983. And I was thinking today, if it was winter, if it was spring. I remember it was a sunny day and we were having a meeting. All of a sudden the door to the office opened and in burst this woman who had this reddish blonde hair, like Leo, you know, the sign of Leo, all around her face. Great big smile, lots of energy. Came into the room and said, just very matter-of-factly, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt the meeting, but there's this very important thing that's going to happen this summer and I'm trying to recruit people to document it. And she put down a pile of papers on the table. And so, you know, about 8 of us, we all started looking at them and grabbed them. And it's one of those things that happens in some people's lives. And I think it's an incredible event when it happens. You just know right away. The answer is yes, I'm doing this. I was a photojournalist first. And so probably that's how I was making my money at that point in time. And that woman was Martha Mollison. She was holding a meeting at her house, maybe like the next Sunday or whatever, and I went. And there were probably, again, I have no idea how many people, 8, 12, somewhere in there. It wasn't a huge group, but it was a good substantial group. And I knew from reading the flyer and what the women's encampment was about and being able to go into it because I believed in what it was about, but also to go into it as a videographer, documentarian. It just worked for me, and I think from going to that meeting it worked for everybody else too. And we all had more or less experience in video. We all had some. I think that was a criteria. She wasn't looking for people that she was going to, you know, that had to get training or something. We all had some experience. So that's how it started. She'd had some connection with somebody at the camp, because how would she have heard about it? I don't know how that came about. If you guys had done publicity or radio or something, how did somebody in Somerville, Massachusetts hear about this camp in upstate New York? I don't know how she heard about it. And what Martha made clear is that it didn't require any real long-term commitment, because some people were already, you know, working, had to work through the summer, and some people said, well, I'll take my 2-week holiday and that's what I'll do. Other people said, I'll go up as many weekends as I can. Other people who had their own business just said, I'm going for the whole summer. And we made a commitment right away that if we were going to cover this, let me finish the sentence, that there would always be a contingent of the Women's Video Collective at the camp at all times, so that even if it was just 2 people during X week, somebody would be there, because the idea was we knew what some of the planned actions were going to be, or we found out, but at any given day you never knew who was going to be marching in from wherever, or somebody was just there for a few days from Greenham Common or, you know, other countries. So to be able to meet these people and understand how they felt about this issue, we realized how important that was. I think a number of them were. But without looking at a list of the original group, it's hard to say. I know Martha was. She was working in Norwood at a TV station. I was volunteering at various stations, trying to learn the trade. I had a degree in photography and film, but I'd never done video. And I think Claire was already working in video. I'm trying to think of some of the original members. You know, most everyone had some experience.
Had you worked in collectives before? That was the first for you?
First for all of us, I think. And that was extremely exciting, because part of our process was developed kind of after the fact. We made the commitment to document the peace encampment. We made the commitment to ourselves that we would take the raw footage and bring it back to Boston, and other women could take copies of it and bring it back to wherever they lived and try to play it on local public access stations. Our goal was simply to get the word out, get the information out, get as many people as we could this information that this was happening, and as a result get people interested obviously in the subject. Not a hard thing to do in the Boston area, because there'd already been lots of action at Seabrook. People were pretty well aware of the nuclear arms issue, so it wasn't that we were trying to, you know, convert people who weren't already involved. But there were lots of people who weren't, and you know, we just knew that we all had connections to these public access stations, which at that time were fairly new. Cambridge wasn't even open yet. It didn't open until 1985. Where I work in Newton didn't open until 1992. Somerville was open. Boston was open. And then there were a few other smaller ones. So we kind of knew Norwood. We knew where we could screen the tapes. And those were our two initial commitments that we made. But in terms of how we functioned as a group, there were some women, some of us hadn't even considered it. Okay, we'll just go out, we'll do the job, get it done, get it seen, and that would be that. But then there were some women, and it was amazing, who came in and said, you know, how we're making these decisions, they could see that it was kind of falling on the heads of women who knew a little more about video or video work. They spoke about the fact that it was important, this before we'd been to the camp, that it was very important that everybody have an equal voice. And they started bringing up these issues. And the rest of us were sitting there going, what are they talking about? And we all agreed it was important. And then, of course, the discussions ensued, well, what does that mean? And how do we do that? So, as a result of that, came the discussion of what do we call ourselves. So we came up with the word collective. We felt that that described us in the best possible way. And it probably took us 3 or 4 meetings just to decide that. And as a result of that process alone, I think we realized that brought us together on an even keel. It was something that had nothing to do with technology or who can get tapes or who's got cameras or who can go when, you know, all those detail-oriented things. This was really an organic process for us to make sure that everybody not only agreed on it, but that everybody had spoken their reasons why. And that was a really good bonding process, as they say now. We had no idea. You get a picture of that. We had no idea how many videotapes. We counted them once, and there were, yeah. You may count more or less, but there were around 80 20-minute, 3/4-inch videotapes. And in fact, before I leave, allow me to, and you can put it on tape, show you a picture of myself and Claire taping and the equipment we had to use then as opposed to this little tiny camera that you've got now. Fascinating. The thing weighed 40 pounds. You had to hang it over your shoulder. We were permanently injured as a result, but you worked through the pain. Yeah. And the cameras were humongous. You remember them. Oh my God. So who's ever going back after a week of shooting is going to take the raw footage. We had duplicating machines in the barn, so we could keep copies there, but we made copies to take back to Boston. And then we would play them on these public access shows where people would have us on. We'd talk about the experience, and maybe other women who'd just gone up to the camp that weekend, and they'd talk about it, and we'd screen some of the videos so people could see it. So that was the initial goal, but then there was a future goal, which was, and it wasn't very well formed, which was down the road, depending on what we have, there's an idea of we could make a longer format documentary. That was just a pipe dream, you know. It takes a lot of time, and I don't think any of us had made documentaries at that point. There's a lot of different ways to make documentaries. You certainly have to think about the fact that what's the purpose of your documentary? Who's your audience? How many people do you want to see this? And how do you make it so people won't turn away from something where it's all women? I mean, we were all, I think, in one way or another, don't quote me, but a lot of us were getting involved or already involved in some form of the women's movement then. We always had Take Back the Night marches here. There was, you know, women's groups you could go to and this and that, you know, and so people, I don't know how old at that point, 83, early 30s. You know, so a lot of us had already done some work in the women's arena in the Boston area. And we already knew, you know, that people could peg you as something and put you down when, you know, that just didn't fit. And of course we all experienced that at the camp, but we didn't really think any further on the documentary, doing a documentary. But what happened is that at one point we were doing a screening in Boston, and somebody attended that screening. I don't remember the gentleman's name. He came up to us afterwards and he said, would you guys be interested in producing a documentary? And we're kind of like, yeah, well, we've been thinking about doing it. You know, this is like, what, August or something. And he said, well, I'm preparing a series on the nuclear arms race for PBS right now, and I need one more video to fill a slot. He had 12 shows. And we said, not a problem. We don't pass up that opportunity, not a problem. And we turned and looked at ourselves and went, oh my gosh, to do a professional videotape we knew was going to cost money, because what public access stations had for equipment and what we'd been shooting on was below PBS standards. We just knew that. And we somehow made the agreement that we would do this. It took 3 months of work. People from the industry who had experience and had access to good equipment volunteered their time. An editor came on board and volunteered not only herself for half the price, but the place where she worked, which was a downtown Boston big-time production house. We got it for half price. We did an offline edit with somebody who didn't even charge us, an editor from WBC in Boston, and then took that edit to the downtown house, and they mastered on 1-inch for us. And it was done the night before it had to go up on the satellite. And it took 3 months to do it, and we worked all night long, a lot of nights. I remember myself and another person being the assistant editors and carrying crates of these tapes after we had looked at all of them and written a script. Which ones have to go to the editor today, and which ones have to go to here, and your house and my house. And we did it. We did it. And then somebody got in their car, took that 1-inch master, drove it to New Hampshire, because that's where they were uplinking it from. And, you know, if you've ever seen broadcast news, it was like, here it comes. And they got it, and up it went, and it was part of that series. And the following year, or 2 years later, the gentleman did another series, and he asked to use that piece, Stronger Than Before, again, which was wonderful. You know, he felt it was powerful enough. You know, and it's the women that were the powerful ones, and we just put it together. But, you know, all in all, it was powerful enough to run again. So it was seen that initial fall on, I don't know how many PBS stations picked it up. They picked up the series across the country, and Canada picked it up as well for their, you know, public network. I was working at the time as a volunteer at a cable station in Arlington, and I saw a flyer for a contest put on by JVC, which is a manufacturer of video equipment. And it said they were looking for all videos from the industry, commercials, you know, sales, promotional videos, etc. And they said, new category this year, public access videos. Anything produced for public access television in any format, particularly documentaries. And I went, took the form, brought it to the next WVC meeting. I said, do you think we should do this? And they said, yeah. And we did. And we won first place with it. We won a camera and a video deck or something, which I still have someplace. And we got 3 of us went to New York. And the coolest thing about it to me was not only did we see the clips of everybody else's videos, of our video, people came up to us who worked in production houses and did commercials for McDonald's and Minolta and, you know, big time car companies all day long, and that's what they did. And they came over to us with, I swear to you, with tears in their eyes. I'll never forget this. And they said, we would love to be able to do what you're doing. They were all a little bit older than us. They all had mortgages and kids to put through college, which most of us didn't at that point in time. And they were just like, keep doing what you're doing. This is so important. And all they saw was like 3 minutes of this video. But they got that this kind of work needs to be done. Now, how do we fund it? Parents, families, spouses, whoever could give us money. We did have a committee that became the fundraising committee of the group, and we did go out and look for funds, but nobody gives you funds to make something. They give you funds to distribute. But then we lucked out because at some point in time, and I think I had the date when this started, Women Make Movies contacted us, or somebody contacted them. And again, I was part of that process. We worked out a contract with them, a non-exclusive contract, so that they put that in their catalog. I think it was 1984 is when it started. And it's only about 3 years ago that they took it out. But hello, they're still getting calls, you know. So they distributed it, and we realized that they could get their catalogs out online now, particularly the last few years, to colleges and universities and women's studies programs across the land and across the world. You know, if people, and Women Make Movies is a great outfit, you know, that's where people go if they want to find videos about women and women's issues. It's still a very viable, wonderful organization. And Deb Zimmerman, we dealt with for years, of course. She was, I think, the founder of that down in New York. So that just kind of like, you know, both those things just kind of happened on their own. And we were like, whoa, we couldn't believe that we could put a documentary together. And then we talked about, well, should we do a longer format documentary? And you'll see from the lists I gave you, I mean, once Women Make Movies got a hold of it and other people knew it existed, again, we owned the rights to it. We just gave it to that guy to put on PBS. They didn't know it. We didn't sell it to them. Other people saw it, and then we started getting calls and, you know, inquiries from people. Hey, I saw this on PBS. Could we get a copy for our school? Could we get a copy for our women's group? How do we do it? So we quickly then had to come up with a rental rate and a sale rate. And do you want VHS or do you want, you know, SVHS? I guess those were your formats back then. And now we can do, yeah, I can't make the DVDs, but I take it out and have DVDs made and stuff. So it's like, it just started to steamroll. So we never did make any longer, you know, hour or 2 hour long documentary, which of course anybody could, because there's tons more footage there. But what the editors were really concerned with was really showing the array of things that went on throughout the summer, because we covered a lot of it, and then trying to get in those sound bites from, you know, women from all over, represent different women, different ages, different backgrounds from different places, to really give the flavor. And, you know, there was so many incredible things people said. I mean, you could do a huge 5-hour documentary and still not cover everything, even though we were standing back videotaping and photographing everyone else. We also made it a point, some days we would meet in the mornings and come out of our tents and meet, and we would say to every woman who was with us that day, okay, you know, depending on what's going on, there'd be meetings, there'd be discussion groups, there'd be decisions being made. If you want to go and be part of that today, just say so now. And you don't have to feel like you have to videotape every day. And so we became part of the process of the camp itself. And as a result, you know, when I don't know, you're doing the documenting now of me, but you stand back and you watch and you listen and you try to get good shots and you make sure the sound's good, and you're thinking of, oh good, we can use this later or whatever. And you're one step removed from what's really going on. When you sit down in a circle, and even if all you do is listen, you know, you're part of that. And that, you know, that conversation becomes part of you, and the process itself becomes part of you. So I know that I spent, I'm going to say at least 4 weekends there, I'm guessing, if not more. And I don't know if I didn't have a full-time job, so I really didn't have a vacation or paid vacation that I could take. So I probably wasn't able to stay for lengths of time, but we would leave. We would get 2 carloads of women leave Boston on Friday, or sometimes Thursday if people could get a Friday off. There was a wonderful woman who lived outside of Albany, New York, and somebody's going to remember her full name. It was Winnie something. And somebody knew Winnie. It might have been Martha. And we were always invited, no matter what time it was, to come to Winnie's house and stay overnight. And there'd always be food left for us if she was asleep. Beautiful house in the country on a lake, because some of us would get up in the morning and go, you know, in the lake first thing in the morning when the dew was on the... I can still picture that. And she was, I can't see her in my mind, but I can remember her. She was an incredibly wonderful person. And I don't know if she went to the camp or not. But then we'd take off and do that drive across the thruway and get out to the camp. And that was our process to get out there. So, you know, we'd be out there all day Saturday because we'd leave really early. Because it was 4 hours to Winnie's and 4 hours more out to the camp or something close to that. So instead of driving all night long, we'd do the stop. And so that was a really nice part of our process. And I'm not sure who thought that up, but I'm thinking it was Claire. And we all agreed. And it was sort of something that probably happened when we got there, because we realized that a lot of women were interested in the fact that we were doing this. And so we would invite them to participate with us. And if they wanted to hold a camera or hold a deck and push the buttons to record or whatever it happened to be, or help us edit things later or copy things. Because one thing we did every night is we'd have screenings in the barn. And we'd put up a sign, I remember, on the outside of the barn, and we'd say screening tonight at 5 o'clock or 7 or whatever, you know, after everything else was over, usually after supper. And so anybody was welcome to come in and see what we had taped that day. And we would just play the raw footage, you know. So it could be, it depended on how many camera rigs we had that weekend, because sometimes we'd have a couple and sometimes we'd have 5. Again, people from New York, women from New York and Ithaca. I remember particularly a woman named Marilyn from Ithaca. She was a professor at Cornell, or Ithaca College, one of them. Anyway, she came up with a rig. Women from New York came up with a couple of rigs. So we would, you know, and so sometimes we'd have 4 or 5 or 6. So then there'd be lots more footage to show that night. And we all traded footage with each other, which was really nice, because they, I don't know, well, actually I do. I think some of them actually made something, but I don't know if I have a copy of it. Anyway, yes, we did invite any women who seemed interested in participating to work with us in any way that they wanted to. Sometimes they'd act as an interviewer, and we would find women who wanted to tell their stories. And then it would simply be like you're doing. They would sit down with usually a handheld mic, and ask this woman questions. You know, we'd prep them a little bit. And,
wow.
You know, get their stories and why they were at the peace camp and what they hoped would be accomplished by this, or what they hoped to get from it themselves, whatever. I forget the actual questions, but you'll hear them when you see the tapes. So, and that was a really, I think, really nice thing to do, because it gave women the power right away to say, you can make these decisions as to where to put the camera, what questions to ask. You know, up until that point, and it's not just women only, up until that point, before portable video cameras got in the hands of the people, so to speak, which was really the mid to late 70s. So it was still fairly a new idea. Most people were like, what is that? You know, news, you know, they'd see a news camera on television, and that was done by the broadcasters. That was done by ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, period. People didn't do this stuff. So I think that was part of what we wanted to say, was like, yeah, you can do this. And you know, I think as a result now, independent film, a lot of people who can't afford film and film cameras, they're using the very high-end digital video cameras and making some pretty remarkable pieces. You know, it's really, really opened doors for a lot of creative filmmakers and video makers, you know, this technology in itself. So I think in a way we were really at the forefront of that. We saw the reactions to the protesters. We photographed those. I think, depending on where the cameras were, you know, we were often off to the side as opposed to being right in the middle of an action. But I'm sure people were, you know, they were just screaming things at all of us. But it's something that we had to turn off. We couldn't allow ourselves to say anything back other than point a camera at them, just to record it, because it was a fascinating dichotomy, let's say, you know, that was going on. And I have to say myself that I wonder how many people who organized the camp and I've been starting to read some of the stuff on the website, really had any idea, and probably nobody had any idea, how much of that was going to happen. Because it was pretty scary some days. It was pretty just awful and mean and horrible, and people weren't listening. And it was all about, we noticed the women, it was just like anti-war. See, I'd been through anti-war stuff myself in the late 60s and early 70s. A lot of us had. And it was about trying to get a dialogue going. It was like, yeah, I know where you stand, but you have no idea what I'm talking about. You gotta stop and listen. You know, stop with the slogans, stop with the, you know, America right or wrong, commies get away. What we found is that there were women coming into the land who also wanted to document what you were doing. They could do it on their own. They could join together with us. There were lots of women out there already doing this. We weren't the first. And as I say, many of us had already done some of this work, you know, in terms of social issues, women's issues, whether with or without video cameras. I'd done it with still cameras.
Right.
So we'd been in the fray somewhere, most of us already. So no, I don't think WVC necessarily opened doors. If we did, it was for those individual women who were there for a day or two or a week and met Claire or Glynis or Nancy Clover or Martha Mollison. And it was like, come, join us. Follow us around for a day. If you want to do any of this stuff, that's great. What would you like to do? You know, I think for them, that's, you know, it's kind of like that adage, you know, it's one person at a time that gets the change. And I would wager, I don't know who those women are, I don't know where they are now, but some of them probably had their just eyes and minds and hearts like totally opened by the concept that it was okay to take that step. It was okay to do this. Technology is not something most women were raised with at all. I mean, you know, I went through training with public access stations where, thank goodness, it's a wide open door policy from day one at those kinds of places. But, you know, the women coming up to us at the camp hadn't been to those places. See, most of us around Boston had, because there were a lot of them. We had those opportunities. So I think that's what we were able to pass on and you know, help inspire others. And one can only assume, like you said, is when you have experiences like this in your life, it takes you through the rest of your life. You can remember it, and then you can like try to work for something and something else you're doing that's going to give that same feeling or result. For us, again, going back to the very beginning, working together as a group, and I cannot recall, and I just maybe am whitewashing it, but I cannot recall any times where any of us had any bad blood between us or controversy or feelings of inadequacy. It was very much, and it wasn't like anybody was really conscious of it, but it was very much like we were, as a group, all helping each other. If we had a new piece of equipment or something didn't work, somebody would step in and say, oh, well, I think I know how to fix that, or let me figure that out. I mean, I would go, hello? I could never do that. But then I'd watch, and then the woman, her name is Glynis, I remember her having these little tools, and I'm like, where'd you learn that? She wouldn't tell me. And then she'd tell us out loud what she was doing. She would just talk about it. I was like, this is marvelous. What man do I know does that? I mean, you know, most girls, their dads, you know, that's just how it was. It's just how it was. We didn't get that kind of background training on what even electricity is. I remember when I found out what electricity was and electrons were and how they go through wires and how sound works. I was absolutely fascinated. I was like, this is really cool. You know, it's kind of magical. It's kind of amazing stuff. I think it's more that we took ourselves to a place where then in the last 20 years we've all been able to blossom from that experience. All the things I've been talking about, you know, working together as women, figuring out how to work together as a group. There was no one leader in our group. There was no one leader. Now, when we formed to be a nonprofit, we had to put names on paper. And we hated doing that. We hated designating who was the president, who was the vice president. We were like, it's just for the government. But we always I don't even know how we ran our meetings. They just ran. And we were able to do what we set out to do without, you know, any major sticky parts. And I'll tell you another story, which is that the group stayed together for 10 years, which is pretty incredible when you think about any group or organization staying together that doesn't have a major source of funding. And what we decided to do was take on projects that we felt strongly about. And over that 10-year period, we produced four or five other major documentaries. And then we decided to do a monthly show on a local cable access station called Women's Vision. And as a result of finding all these, I found 27 shows we produced, 60-minute shows on different topics. And the women that came and went out of the group, it was up to somebody to come up with an idea, and then the rest of us would volunteer to work on that show with them. So we'd be crew, we'd be researchers, we'd be interviewers, we'd do location work. We'd set it in a studio, but it was mostly videotapes that we were showing. We'd introduce it and then show the videos. And talk about an issue, whatever the issue happened to. I was amazed. I knew I had those tapes somewhere, and I found them, and it was really cool to find them. So you see, it gave us, by doing this at the camp and bringing us together, it gave us all, without us even knowing it, this opportunity to carry on and continue the experience of working together, but also the experience of making these videos that then we could put out and, you know, for whoever wanted to see them, to, you know, provide information to people, disseminate information, because, you know, what else are we doing this for? It's to communicate, it's to tell people things that they may not know about, or ask them to think about something in a different way that they hadn't thought about it. You know, I just think documentaries are some of the most powerful vehicles in terms of media that there is. And it was seen, I'm hearing the number in my head of 150 stations. I mean, to us, this was just like, wow. And out of that came people who saw it in their homes, in their, sorry, I'm pounding on the table, in their living rooms, and were already, or they were starting women's studies programs, or they were involved in them, or they were teaching at a college, or they felt like they were in a women's group or organization somewhere in the middle of Kansas. And, you know, contacted us or contacted their station and said, you know, got back to this guy who then got to us and said, how do we get a copy of that? We want to take that and then show it to our group of women here and have a discussion around it. We need to use this. In fact, some of the things, when you read through the list of some of the distribution places, it's not just schools. There's tons of conferences that ordered this to use and play during a conference. People who were mobilizing for something. People who were just having some sort of a meeting. But there was a generation of kids that I know somewhere in the last 10 years that there was I'm very interested in social development issues and how the times affect people. And that's kind of what I did my graduate work in. And there were a lot of kids saying, like, we don't know what we want. We don't care about anything. There's nothing to do. And the parents were all like us, going, oh my God, you know, there's Iraq and there's this and there's, you can protest. And the kids were like, what good will it do? Look what happened in the 60s. And we were like, no, look what happened in the 60s. No. It was all about learning to be with people outside of your own little circle that you were raised with. Anyway, that's to me with the 60s, there was a lot of stuff going on, and that's a big part of it, is meeting people from all over. And yeah, there was a common goal in the sense of stopping the war, and then out of that came a lot of other movements, including women's rights and you know, women's movements and equal pay and all of that, hoo-ha, and abortion rights and hello. Still fighting all of those. But you know, there's a history there. There's a very important history there, and it's a very recent history. And I understand that just now, I don't know why so much time has to go by, people are starting to convey that, and I think younger people are starting to learn it and get it, and not just like, oh, the 60s, y'all took drugs and you were all out of your minds and you wore those crazy clothes. There was a reason behind all of that. for most people. Not for everybody, but for most people.
Yeah.
There was a reason behind all of that. We were driven by something to do that. It was get out of the 50s mold, and for a lot of people it was, again, big experience. Changed their lives. To me, there's a correlation.
Yeah, definitely.
From there all the way up to what happened at the peace camp, in terms of, again, all the decisions that were made of, we weren't just videotaping, we were listening.
Right,
you know, in
right.
terms of how everybody there got along and how decisions were made. And I remember there were some heated discussions that went around for days to come to consensus.
Yeah.
It was my
Yeah, for
first
me-
experience with that. And not only watching the process, but the subjects that were discussed. Many people had never had the opportunity to discuss those things before.
Right.
Or it wasn't discussed. I remember sitting at Glynis's apartment in Cambridge and going through every videotape. And 4 or 5 of us sitting there. Oh, that's a great one. No, that's not so great. No, this one's better. We got to use this. No, we realized editing by consensus was not the best way to edit, but we did come up with a list of things that we thought were really, really important. And then we sat, 2 of us took that list to the woman who offered her time to do the initial edit. And of course, she had some feelings about it as well, which was great, because she was looking at it more from, how's this going to play to an audience? You got too many people saying this and nobody's saying this, you know, or you don't need this many people saying the same thing. They'll get it if they hear it once. They'll get that that represents, you know, something, or it's a statement somebody made. So we knew we had to make a 27-minute video is what they asked for. 27 minutes out of this. So that's why we had to look through every single tape. It took weeks. I mean, almost every night there would be a group sitting at Glynis's house, you know, after work or whatever. We just start playing them. I think a group of women came forward, I'm guessing, and said, well, we'll be the ones to do that. Some of us can't be there every night, but at least, you know, that core would be, because if you keep switching that group around too much, you'll never. And that's what we learned, is that we had to hone it down enough to then go to one person with 2 people who'd been through that process to say, okay, these are the things we think are important. I remember us even sitting at Glynis's and putting together an opening sequence that we thought was great. And it was pretty darn good. Well, Linda Rubin took one look at it and she said, I don't think so. And she said, let me do something for you. She's the one that decided to open the video with the woman right at the beginning. I know she's got a headband on and short brown hair. And she reads a statement. She's standing at the gate. We the women, something, 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 something. I heard it, 6,000 times. You'd think I would have memorized it. But it's 20 years later. And she said, that is going to knock people out. It's going to keep their attention. And she taught us to think about it one step removed. We were all there. We taped all this stuff. We were having trouble making decisions about what's important. How could we throw this up? This is important. It's very difficult to edit anything, no matter where you come from. But she hadn't been there. So she could look at it with a pure, objective eye. And she simply took what we had, reorganized it, pulled out some other footage, looked at it, and pieced together the opening statement. Because you see the woman on the screen for 4 or 5 seconds, but then you keep hearing her voice, and it cuts away to shots of actions. And we probably already had picked those. And then the music starts, and then there's more actions. So she's the one that kind of said, this is how we're going to weave it together. And we all just went, yeah, that really works. So that, again, none of us, I think, had ever edited a documentary. And she got that this was going on PBS, number one. And she got that this had to really be powerful. And she got how powerful it was just by looking at even small bits of the footage. It's not that she wouldn't say, at 10 minutes into the video, what else you got? And so we'd say, well, we'll come back tomorrow night. We had all our logs, mountains of them, log sheets. And we knew what we had, and we'd say, well, we've got this woman from such and such a place, and she's saying such and such. Bring it in, I want to see that. I need something else here. This transition doesn't work. I need another statement. Or does anybody else say this thing as well, but better? Or we've got too many women speaking who are all the same age. Give me somebody who's older. Give me somebody who's younger. You know, she was the one to be able to say, you know, keep us on track of what our goal was, but be able to be one step removed, which was difficult for us. Because I think we did try to show what was going on in the area in reaction to what was going on at the camp. But we didn't insert all the news articles or say CBS said this or whatever. If we'd done a longer format documentary, then I think we would have brought in varied perspective of what other, you know, reporters were thinking of, or even get permission to use somebody's story from NBC that night, or Ted Koppel's story, or whatever. We might have chosen to actually go around the town and interview people after the fact. You know, we could have gone back the next year and done that and gotten people's stories. Because, you know, there were some really good stories there. I'm not just talking about the people who were acted badly. Yeah. There were women that came over to the camp, and I remember them saying, if my husband found out I was here, he'd kill me, but I need to be here. You know, they just knew they needed to be there and find out what was going on. They knew it was important. They knew it was something about all these women together that was important. It drew them for all kinds of reasons. I remember hearing that, and I don't know if I don't think we interviewed them. We might have, but it's not on the videotape. So, in other words, a longer format documentary, a different documentary, could have had a little bit broader perspective. But I think our what we were trying to focus on was the peace encampment itself, the actions that came from the peace encampment, the people who marched into the camp, the marches to the gate, the actions at the gate, really trying to show what it was about from that perspective, and then also interviewing the women who'd come from all these different areas, and why had they come, and what did they hope to accomplish by being there, and why was it important for them to be there, and those kinds of questions. So I think that our focus was you know, from the get-go planned to be that. And again, I don't know who made that decision per se, but I think that there may be tapes that contain lots of things that don't have anything to do with that per se. There may be interviews with townspeople. I don't know. But when we chose to do the 27-minute video, we had to make decisions. And I would think that Linda Rubin or some of us would have made those decisions along the line to say, look, you can't go super duper broad, or this thing's just going to be all over the place. You've got to pick a focus, and most of what the stuff you did was in the backyard or going along with the marches. You know, we would assign ourselves to, okay, what's going on today, and who's going to take this rig? You know, two of you go out and follow these people as they go over there and do this, or they're making their costumes or masks or whatever, or even just having a meeting or a prep for, you know, because women would get together, I remember, in these small groups and just prepare themselves to go to the depot. You know, and that was a really powerful thing, and to have the access to get really just right in there and personal was amazing. So I think that as a result of being at the camp, we discovered right away what we felt was important, and then probably when we made the video, it was a question of, well, this thing makes no sense. Why put it in? It doesn't fit with the rest of it. I remember some meetings where less and less people would show up, and it just became apparent that people had other things going on in their lives. Many women had young children. Some had married. Some had moved away. Some had gotten full-time jobs, and you know, that were fairly consuming. So going out on a Sunday night to a meeting was just, you know, when you're not 32, you're 42, was like, oh, I want to stay home on Sunday night. I just want to go out. I don't want to go to the meeting. And so a discussion ensued of, well, are we going to produce any more tapes? We're still distributing tapes. And what are we going to do? And after some discussion, it was decided to pretty much disband the group, which didn't mean that people weren't going to stay in touch and see each other. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was at an event at the Brattle Theater in Cambridge. It was a video festival. And a guy walked up to me in the lobby and said, "Hello, how are you? Nice to see you after all these years." It was Nancy Clover's husband. And I'm kind of like, "You look familiar, but you know, I can't." He's like, "Paul Clover." I'm like, "Oh my God." I was like, "Is Nancy here?" I hadn't seen her in like years because they'd moved up to northern Massachusetts, right? And so it's like not as easy as, "Oh, she's down the street in Somerville, let's, you know, get together or have dinner or something." And I knew they had kids. They have 2 kids now. Anyway, so Paul said, "Nancy's here." And I said, "Look, I have to speak and introduce somebody at this video festival. Don't tell her that I'm here. She'll see me on stage, and then I'll see her afterwards." So it was great. And I was at a conference in Tacoma or something like that. And anyway, I decided to go see my cousin in Victoria. And I knew Claire was in Seattle. She'd just gone out the year before. Called her up. "Claire, I'm coming out." She's like, "Well, you got to stay with me. You got to stay a couple of days. Come on up." So, you know, got to see Claire for a couple of days. And that's how it is when you have that, like, well, 10 years experience, but even if it was just in the peace camp, I think we'd all feel that way when I called a couple of other women, you know, to see if they wanted to be part of this weekend with you guys. They were thrilled. A lot of us stayed in video, and like I say, there were just opportunities opened up as more and more stations opened. Some people went into broadcast, some people went into educational media. People were taking their skills and earning a living with them. I think in terms of my going there, I don't know if I went back any other time. I know some of the women did. You'll have to ask them. It seems to me some did. Cambridge Forum. Oh, this is what I told you. This is the guy.
Oh, so that was the...
This is the new arms race. He put together and found all these different videos across the country and asked us to contribute to it. Now, at that point, it was called the Women's Encampment for a Future, I guess. But that's the Women's Video Collective, Massachusetts / New York. Cambridge Forum Presents. It was a radio show initially, and then this guy started doing video collections, and somehow it got, you know, put on PBS. So, oh my God, she had that. Oh my God, she had all this stuff. Oh my God, there's the car again. There's the car.
You guys like the car.
It was orange or something. I don't remember. We had a fundraising video party at the Institute for Arts and Sciences, and music to Boogie 2. Who did this? Oh my Lord. This is your chance to see. Stronger than before it hits the tube. That's great. Take the bus. Suggested donation, $4. Hello. Food and drink, women's music, videos, music, dancing. Oh, that's hysterical. I remember this. And I remember this. Oh my gosh, I can't believe she had all this stuff.
Do you know who that is?
That's the truck where they uplinked it from.
Oh, okay.
That's the truck
I wondered what
where
that
they
was.
uplinked it from.
Okay.
And that's Linda Rubin standing there with the videotape ready to go. In the middle of the night. Look how dark it is. So Nancy probably went with her and took that shot. That's Linda Rubin. That's our 1-inch master, and that's our 3/4 inch Ampex tape. Oh my God, that's the truck. Stronger than before. Well, there's the lead titles from the show on New Hampshire Public Television. Oh, and these are the postcards Nancy made. This was a whole series. In fact, I have to get this book to her now. I have her book listing all the places that people would come and buy this set of postcards, and we sold those as well. This is Claire teaching someplace, and she was a wonderful teacher. That's why I think she had a lot to do with bringing in the women on those, just to come and be with us for a day at the camp.